In this lesson, we'll talk about MicroMesh and how we can use it to create some really detailed models. So we'll start by just looking at a plane as an example. So I've just drawn out this. I've gone ahead and changed the divisions to 10. And so what we want to do is we want to replace each one of these polygons with our own separate model to create the look of something much more complex. So in this case, to turn on MicroMesh, we need to convert this to a polygon. And then let's go down to Geometry in our tool palette. And under Modify Topology, there's a button here for MicroMesh. So let's go ahead and hit that button. And here it's asking us for the model that we want to use as our MicroMesh. So what model do we want to replace these polygons with? So let's go ahead and replace it with the arrow. Okay. So it's going to tell us MicroMesh is only visible in best preview render, and we need to turn something on to be able to see it. So we'll say OK to that. So our MicroMesh is on. We don't see anything different here. So let's go up to Render, Render Properties, and I'm going to turn on Draw MicroMesh. And here we get a little indication of what that's actually going to look like. So if we render this, you can see that we get our little arrows pointing at us. Every polygon you can see is now an arrow. Okay, and we can come in here. There are options for spinning the edge if you've got something that's pointing along a different direction, or we can align our edges so that they're all matched up. And you can hover over any of these and hit Control, and it'll kind of give you an explanation of what that's actually doing. So if you want this to be, instead of pointing straight on, what we can do is go into our arrow. Okay, and let's go into Preview. I'm going to rotate it and store it. So I'm rotating it around so it's pointing up and down. Now let's come back to our plane. Okay, and we'll re-micromesh that. So go ahead and grab that back. And now when we render it, you can see that they're all pointing together in one direction. Okay, we can also come in here now and spin the edges. So now they're all pointing left. Okay, we can spin them again, and now they're all pointing up. So we can change the orientation of these. Now, a cool thing is that you can create your own MicroMesh that takes advantage of this and make it actually kind of bleed together and create a continuous surface. So I've got this model called Great Section, and you'll find it in your project files. You can open that up. And so let's see what happens if we use that on this. So we'll choose MicroMesh, we'll choose our Great Section, and then let's go ahead and render. So what that's going to do is create this sort of grate effect here. Turn off polyframe. It's going to create what looks like a grate, a continuous grate, but it's really, it's one polygon. So let's use this on our grate. So in our object here, we want to replace the top of this with a grate. So the first thing that I want to do is to go ahead and take the top. I'm going to go ahead and select this piece here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go down to the lowest level. And I want to separate out, let me go to Solo here. So I want to separate out this piece. And so I'm going to go to Subtool and Split. And let's go Split Hidden. Okay, so that'll split off these pieces. And now if I turn off Solo, and I can go to Deformation, and I want to offset this in the Y, so I'll move it down a little bit. Okay. Next thing I want to do is append a plane onto this. So I'm going to go back in and create a new plane. So I want to create something that is maybe a little bit higher res than that. So I'm going to increase go back to the primitive plane, increase this to maybe 15 by 15, something like that. Let's go ahead and make that a polymesh. And then I just want to append it to this model. So go to Subtool, and append. And let's append our plane. And now I just want to put it into position. So we'll grab that and let's just rotate it. And I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. Increase the size of it. And I want to increase the size until it extends past the circle shape of that base. And I'll kind of move it down a little. Okay, just until it penetrates right in there. And then let's move it back. And let's increase the size just a little. Just so it's right outside of that. Okay, so something like that. We'll offset it a little bit up into where it's penetrating in there. And now let's do a micromesh on this piece. The same way that we just did. So go into Modify Topology, Micromesh. And let's select our grate section. So now that's loaded up. So now let's see what happens if we render this. So go ahead and just hit BPR. We've got that option enabled. So it should show us our grate. Okay, but it's still not geometry. We're just seeing it here as part of our polygon. So what we can do is we can actually convert this micromesh into actual geometry so that we can have an actual grate here. And the way we do that is we move up from here, and then you can see there's this convert BPR to geo. So all we're going to do is hit that, and it's going to take what we did have at render time and convert that into actual geometry. So now I can take a material and a color, and I can come in, and I just want to make sure I'm on that particular subtool there, and I can go ahead and fill it just so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, and we also want to turn off our polyframe. That allows us to see it a bit better as well. So there's our grate. Now obviously it's extending out past where we want it to be. So now these are all polygons, so what we can do is just get rid of the ones that we don't want. So to do that, I've got the select rectangle selected, and it has a rectangle stroke right now. I'm going to change that to circle, and I'm going to change it to square and center, so I can draw it out from the center and it'll stay circular. Okay, so drawing this out from the top view, I'm just going to draw it out until it's kind of right penetrating into the sides of our little base here. So something like that. Okay, let go, and it's only gonna turn off the visibility on anything that's outside of there. So now what we can do is go down to our geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden right here. Modify topology, delete hidden. And that'll get rid of those bits of the mesh that were sticking out. So we get a nice clean quad layout for our grate, and it doesn't stick outside of this piece here. So we can go back to that piece right there, take the subdivisions back up, and there we're left with our mesh, which is now actual geometry, and it's cut out so that it matches and it doesn't stick outside of this piece here. Okay, so that's kind of cool. You can come up with a lot of different options for how you want to build geometry to use as your micromesh and be creative with those. You can see I've created a section here that kind of has it overlapping, so it kind of goes up and down, up and down. But if you want to just have a kind of a mesh that's connected, you can do that as well. All right, so that is how we can use micromesh and convert to geometry to be able to use. In the next lesson, let's take our mesh that we created and start to use Dynamesh to create sort of a puddle that is kind of puddling or pooling underneath him, but also kind of stuck to some of the individual wires here and make it look a little bit more realistic. So we'll take a look at how we can do that in the next lesson.